0.96.
Hey guys, Sarge here. We are here for another episode of Shooting It with Two, and for today's primary topic, we are going to discuss the 1911. It's been around for over 100 years, as we all are well aware. A lot of people say that it's old technology, they're not reliable, but there are still companies today that are selling $1,000 1911s, and they're making a living off of it. So there must be something there that is obviously working enough for them to stay in business. Because as we all know, there are companies that start up and they make a product for a little bit, then they can't keep up with it. So then they end up falling through the cracks and not being a business much longer. So for starting off, what we're going to talk about is what I look for in a 1911. And this is if I'm going to go purchase one, maybe I don't want to do any customization to it. What do I want the gun to already have on it? So I have to do less to it, right? Right off the bat, I want it to have front strap checkering. Okay, when I say front strap checkering, I'm referring to the checkering right here. I like anywhere from 20 to 30 line per inch checkering on that. What I also like is having a magwell, okay? That is a big plus for me. Then a memory bump to the extended beaver tail. So the reason why I like the memory bump is so as my hand closes in on it, I don't have to fully get this grip, because let's say I can't get this full grip where I'm pressing it down tight. Maybe I'm in a fight with somebody. Maybe I'm picking it up off the ground and I have to get it into action. Having that extra memory bump to where I can depress it this far out without having to grab it up tight like you would have to do on some mil-spec models, that makes a big difference to me. Having sights that I can either see or sights that I can replace. I had a Springfield mil-spec, and it had the mil-spec sights that I would have to go and pay somebody like $100 to $200 just to cut the slots out for them. Just get one that already comes with the Novak style or the Bomar style sight cuts, and then you can just put whatever sight you want on it. For certain applications, I like having a rail. So if I want to run this in a home defense scenario or as an everyday carry pistol, the accessory rail is a plus for me, because I 100% believe you should see what you're shooting. And if it is in the middle of the night, why do I want to take up both my hands, one with a gun, one with a light, when I could just do it at the same time? So that's my kind of thought process. With that being said, too, not everything that I shine with my light, I want to shine with my gun. So absolutely, you should have a handheld light, but I like having it attached to the gun as well. What are some things you look for in a 1911?
We look for a lot of the same things. So I prefer sights that I can replace. But if I'm just going out to purchase them, especially for a carry gun, those that come with night sights stock are awesome. I prefer the 3-dot setup. I'm not a fan of the blacked out and then just having a dot up front, just my personal preference. I like front cocking serrations because press checks for life. Also, front strap checking is awesome. This is a double stack commander, so I don't really need a magwell for this, but if I was carrying a single stack, I would also prefer that. I like the memory bump safeties. I prefer to have this little beaver tail, vice the GI little crow's foot that comes off. I feel that it bites into my hand when I'm shooting. The rail I can do without, but if I had to pick, I'd have a preference for one with the rail. And then I have a preference for full-length guy rods. My mindset could be completely unfounded. I just prefer to mitigate any chance of the recoil spring binding when it's going back on the standard shorter GI springs. So I like having that full-length guy rod to have a path for the spring travel. Just my mind, peace of mind, just less chance of the spring binding, so I don't have to worry about that. And then grips automatically change out, and I prefer the VZ operator grips. Just made out of G10, very good scales. And then just my preference, and also look for ones that don't have the plastic mainspring housings, because these have a tendency to break just because they're under a lot of pressure from the spring tension in there. So if you do buy a 1911 that has a plastic, it's rare, but they're out there. I definitely replace it with a metal mainspring housing. But that's essentially just what I look for. But if I had to do just the one thing, ultimate thing that I look out for is just be the full length guy rod. That's right. The ultimate thing. If I wouldn't replace anything else, on a gun, it'd be the full length guide rod.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, for me too, I'll go ahead and mention that. I run a GI guide rod for mine. And then as you guys know, my sights are XS sights. So for me, and you brought it up when you talked about grips,
Mm-hmm.
I have found that you can get away with having less texturing on your grips if you have your mainspring housing and your front strap checkered.
Mm-hmm.
If you don't have your front strap checkered, absolutely, I think it would be more important to have really aggressive grips here.
Mm-hmm.
I normally run, I don't know where they're at. I normally run a set of ivory grips, which are slick,
Mm-hmm.
and I can kind of get away with it a little bit better because the mainspring housing and my front strap are so aggressively checkered that it locks
Mm-hmm.
my hand into place. But definitely having some form of checkering here definitely makes a huge difference. You brought up that your 1911 is a commander size, right?
Yep.
Okay, so let's go ahead and explain that. So this is a government model 1911. When I say government model, right, this one is in 9mm.
Mm-hmm.
It has a 5-inch barrel and an 8.7-inch slide. The frame of this 1911 is the full size frame that it'll take. It holds 9 rounds of 9mm, and it would be 8 or 7 rounds of 45 ACP. In my opinion, these are the most reliable size. So if you're looking at 1911s, the main, if you're even looking for a carry gun, which we'll get in here into a minute,
Yep.
but I would look at a government model. One, these are insanely thin. They're not hard to handle for carry. They have a good weight to them, so that way they're not recoiling too much.
Mm-hmm.
But these are also the most reliable of them all, in my opinion, would be the government model. The lowest I would go is a commander. And do you want to talk about the commander real quick?
Yeah, so Commander, this one specifically, I want to say the measurement's like 4.41 inches for the barrel. It's slightly longer than a Glock 19, but slightly shorter than a Glock 17. So it's got that nice middle ground. Like you're saying, this grip is more so fits like a compact size gun, so slightly smaller than a full size. Because this is a double stack, this holds 18 rounds, a 9mm. I haven't really had any reliability issues, primarily because, and this is also depending on how your frames are cut. I don't know if I'll be able to show it on camera, but you can kind of see it. But this is a ramped barrel.
Yep.
So depending on your frame cuts, it'll either have a Baer Clark cut in the ramp, a Wilson Nolan cut, or it'll be just a flat cut, so it has a non-ramp barrel. So ramp barrels ensure reliable feeding on hollow point. So that's why I recommend if you do get a commander size gun, most of them do come with ramp barrels. But if not, I would highly recommend looking for that one. Because the hollow points, because they're not going up that ramp where the frame meets the barrel in a non-ramp cut, it has a tendency to gouge in the frame. So going with that ramp barrel provides a harder surface and then more tendency to slide up. So that's what I think helps the reliability for the commander size guns, is just mitigating it with a ramp barrel. But I haven't had any issues out of that. But just for size comparison, this is more so, I would say these are I wouldn't say best. These are my most preferred for carry, just because of the size of it. So, a lot of people say you can conceal the slide. Yeah, right. But most people like carrying the Glock 19 more than like carrying the Glock 17, just due to the size of the slide. So I think this one's catered more for me for carry, just due to the size of it.
Well, and you brought up a good point there. One thing that we are going to talk about is with the reliability of it. Reliability is normally the first thing people argue about. Then the second one is capacity. The same people that say 1911s do not have enough capacity are the same people that carry pocket guns, Smith & Wesson shields, Glock 43s, or whatever it is, and that's okay to do. Or there are people that don't carry guns every single day, but they want to tell you how you need to have 30 rounds in a magazine to do X, Y, or Z. If you actually look at shootings that have taken place, I haven't seen one where someone has even reloaded a magazine due to the need of needing more bullets. Also, if you are in a situation where you are, let's say you have multiple attackers or whatever it is, you need to get out of the range mindset to where you're going to be standing directly in front of them. That is 100% a rangeism that needs to be get rid of it. Okay, movement is going to keep you alive. If you stand directly in front of them, it doesn't matter how many rounds you have in the gun. because you're helping them shoot you. So that's something that you need to think about. Movement will help out quite a bit, okay? Because if you have no movement, it doesn't really matter how many rounds you have in the gun. Whereas if I have a lot of movement and I am finding cover and I am analyzing the situation, me doing a 1.5 second, 2 second reload is not going to end the gunfight for me, okay? That's just my opinion. When we talk about reliability, 1911s get a horrible rap for reliability. And I think it is due to, one, crappy manufacturers. That's right off the bat. Real crap 1911 makers who that's kind of what people are introduced to. They assume that, and I don't know why it is like that, but like if a XYZ manufacturer makes a polymer frame 15 round striker fired pistol, people say, okay, well, that one sucks. They don't say all polymer frame striker fired pistols suck, right?
Yep.
I don't know what it is about the 1911 to where if somebody buys a brand of these, they blame the whole gun for sucking. That blows my mind. But primarily the issue is, and this is just from what I found, the magazines. The only magazines that I run are Wilson Combat. I have had no issues from Wilson Combat magazines at all. I have found those to be extremely reliable in every 1911 I've run them in. The other issue is just knowing your pistol, right? So when it comes to keeping this gun reliable, I have found that if you use gun grease, okay, instead of liquid lubrication, I have found that these work a whole lot better. And when I say gun grease, I don't cake it on, okay, because then when it starts getting carbon, it'll start gunking up a lot. You put a thin layer of the gun grease on there, and I have yet to have a malfunction from it. And when I get back home from the range and I disassemble my pistol, I still have all the grease that I started with. Whereas if you run liquid lubrication, can you say the same? Not in all the cases for it, right? And unless you buy some nicer quality one. But that's something that I think about. So magazines, keeping it properly lubricated. And then another issue that 1911s have are the extractors. As you can see here, mine has what's called an external extractor. Eddie's has an internal extractor, and he can talk about that, where his extractor, instead of it being seen on the outside, is all running internally. Also with that, my extractor is held in place by a pin and a spring, okay? So for me to take my extractor out of this pistol, I have to punch a pin out, or excuse me, this one's, I just unscrew it, and then pull my extractor out, and there's a spring there so I can clean it, do any maintenance I need to do with it. For him, all he has to do is take the slide off the gun and pull the ejector out, right? Once you take off the firing pin stop, you can pull the ejector out. Very easy to do. But the issue is with reliability, a lot of the guns that have internal extractors, they're not properly tuned. There are big name manufacturers like Colt and a couple others that they actually have been, a couple workers from Colt have come out and said once they've left Colt that they just throw them in the guns and they send them out the door. They don't test fire them. Well, you need to make sure those internal extractors are properly bent to a certain degree, or you're not going to have correct tension with them. And unfortunately, if you don't understand your gun, if you have malfunction after malfunction after malfunction, and you're not really paying attention to what the malfunction is, you might go and waste all this money on buying new magazines, all this money on buying XYZ new part, when all you had to do is pull your extractor out and bend it. So knowing your gun is very important. Okay. If I was going to get into a new series, like if I was going to get into a 1911, man, I would go find a local gunsmith that works on 1911s and makes a living from 1911s, and ask him if he takes any, if he does any like 1911 operator classes or anything like that. That is what I would recommend, just so you can kind of understand this pistol a whole lot better. So what do you think? What do you got on reliability and capacity?
So just like you said, it's just like any other mechanical object. Like, you got to take care of it. So you realistically can't run a 1911, like you could run a Glock. Like Glocks can run dirty. Some 1911s can, but they have work done to them. So you gotta take care of it. But that's with any firearm, because you want to make sure it works in any kind of situation. So lubrication is key. Like for me personally, whenever a range session, I just wipe it down pretty much. Just wipe all the carbon off. I don't really do any deep cleanings. But then once a month, I do take the gun completely apart and then clean everything, because you'd be surprised, especially for those of you not really familiar with 1911s, there's a lot of small parts in there that collect a lot of dirt. So
Yeah.
like the leaf spring, the disconnector, the sear, like those get really dirty if you're shooting it after a long time, you're not cleaning them. So I recommend, at least for me, what I do is once a month, depending on how much I shoot, I do a complete disassembly of it, and then I clean all the parts. Also reliability too, like depending on the brand of firearm that you buy, I want to say you don't have there's not really good finishing done to all the parts. So so I recommend whatever I do. So whenever you buy a 1911, completely disassemble it and do an inspection of all the parts. You'll be surprised how many rough edges, shards of metal, they're kind of sticking out in the gun, and then that can cause reliability issues. So I recommend is take the gun apart and inspect everything. And if you find that you have a lot of rough surfaces, don't remove any metal, because you don't want to impede the function of the firearm.
Yeah.
But like 1,000, 1,500 grit sandpaper, just kind of rub the parts just to get those rough edges down. And then I guarantee you'll feel like just from the day you buy it to now, or to that point when you do that, you're going to notice a considerable difference in the function of the firearm.
Or find a qualified
Qualifying
individual
gunsmith.
and have them do it before you start messing around with your gun.
Depending your familiarization with the platform.
Right. Okay. Fantastic.
So take that with a grain of salt.
Another topic I want to get into is with the Series 80 and Series 70. So this one is the Series 80, and as you can see right there, there is a plunger, and what that does is there is a firing pin block in this 1911, and it is very similar to what is in Glocks, M&Ps, things of that nature. So on the internals of this 1911, if I were to take off this mainspring housing, right, there are, you have your hammer strut and a couple other of the parts here. Well, when I take off the mainspring housing and I'm actually going to disassemble or look into the parts, there are two sear levers here which activate that plunger upon firing for me to shoot the pistol. What that does in return, it's kind of a safety feature to it as well. Because there were apparently some reports with the Series 70, which he'll talk about the Series 70 lineup, that if they were dropped or something to that effect, the inertia of it hitting the ground could cause the firing pin to come forward. So kind of the way that Colt was the original Series 80 designer for it. I think it was Colt and Armand Swinson, but the whole idea is, okay, well, we'll put a firing pin block in here. What that does, because we can't have something added and not have something taken away, it made the triggers horrible. And it's normally the biggest gripe. People talk about, man, you cannot get a good trigger on a Series 80. They're like 5 pounds or 6 pounds or whatever it is, and they're horrible, right? Whereas on your Series 70s, they have nice triggers. Well, I had a little bit of work done to this one, and it's a Series 80, okay? That is the take-up right there, the wall, and that's it. I mean, this is about a 2.5 pound, give or take, trigger. I like it quite a bit. But so just so you know, Series 80s, they do have a firing pin block safety in them. Do you have anything you want to add with the Series 70 lineup?
Just touch on a few points just for Series 80, because my Commander is also Series 80. So just like you have the firing pin block right there for the safety. And then I have took the slide off so people can see if they're not familiar. What he's referring to, that extra part in the Series 80, is you have this little piece right here that shows, and you have another one that's actually inside the frame. All right, so that's what's adding to that extra trigger weight that most people complain about Series 80s. Now, for your Series 70, this is my single stack 45. You notice I don't have the little stop right there. And then in the frame, I also don't have the little cutout. Okay, so just so you can see what a difference between a Series 70 and a Series 80 is. I have found that the people who worry about dropping the Series 70 and the gun going off, you also got to remember that besides the thumb safety that's already on the firearm that should be active if the holster's if the gun's just sitting on your hip, but you also have to defeat that grip safety before the trigger will go bang. So don't just think like, oh, I'm gonna drop my 1911, it's gonna go off because it doesn't have that extra safety measuring. It's got to defeat the grip safety, and then if your leaf spring is properly tensioned, like this, just falling on the ground, this is not going to depress that. You have to actually add intentional force to actually defeat that grip safety.
Right, and that's something to look at too. Actually, and that's plays a huge part into knowing your firearm. I didn't even know what a Series 70 or Series 80 was when I bought this. It was after I bought it. I disassembled it, and the 1911 reassembly video I was watching was of a Series 70. And I was like, well, crap, mine has these extra parts in it. What the crap is this? So then that made me go and look it up, and I was like, oh my gosh, crap. So no, I mean, just know if you see certain ones, I know all the 6 hours for the most part, those are Series 80s. Smith and Wessons, I believe, are Series 80s. Springfield Series 70. Remington, what is Remington, Series 70 or 80?
Depending on what line you get. So if you get anything, I think that was made after like 2016, 2017, everything is Series 80.
Okay. So that's kind of your pick. I personally, the next one of these that I get, I'm looking at getting a custom one that is going to have some cool logos on it and stuff like that. It's going to be a Series 70, and that's just kind of the route that I'm going to stick to. Something I will say as well for finish, I run Cerakote on all mine. What I have found with Cerakote is it's kind of like a cast iron skillet, to where when I get done shooting at the range, all the carbon just kind of clumps up and I just wipe it off and it's gone. I don't know what it really is about the metallurgy or anything like that. What Cerakote gets applied to it, I don't know, but it super easy to clean, super easy to wipe off. Something to pay attention to is this gun was already kind of tight after I had some work done to it. When I then had them Cerakote it, it then was insanely tight. So if your gun is built to certain tolerances, adding that extra layer of Cerakote, you're going to have to go and shoot it to wear it back in.
Yep.
That brings up the next point. Looking at the tolerances. A tighter 1911 does not necessarily mean that it's going to be more reliable, that it's going to be better quality. That is not what that means. And that's something I thought. That was something I had to get educated on. For the shooting that I do, for me teaching courses, me having an insanely tight 1911 would actually be bad. The area that I shoot at, and you've been to it, there's a lot of sand, there's a lot of dirt, and I drop pistols on the ground. And the reason why I drop pistols on the ground is if you've never dropped your pistol on the ground, how do you know how to properly pick it up? And all you people that say, well, I know how to pick it up, I have seen people in classes drop their pistol on the ground, not because I told them to, but because we were shooting and moving, and they dropped their pistol on the ground, and they said, oh, crap, and they jumped backwards. If you do that in a gunfight, you're probably going to lose. So that's why we do it. Okay. That's why we teach you to, hey, if the gun is falling, what I don't want you to do is stick your finger in the trigger and try to grab it. Okay. Which I've also seen. So just let it fall. It'll be okay. Okay. And I have some cool little scratches and stuff all over the gun. Okay. And it builds character. Okay. So that's how I kind of feel about tolerances. What do you think?
Just like you said, tolerances. So having a really tight gun doesn't ensure that it's going to be reliable. If anything, that means you're going to have what most people associate with 1911s having that break-in period. Having a really tight gun, you're going to have to work it out, because especially if it won't feed certain type of ammunition, you're going to have to work the gun so it cycles that. So just keep in mind, like, I like having a tight fitting gun, but not to the point where it's like I have to work to pull rapid slide back. Yeah. It's like I have to go through 1,000 rounds just to have the gun fully broken in, knowing that it'll cycle any kind of ammunition that I give it. So take it with a grain of salt. Don't by any means have a really loose gun, because it'll run dirty, but then it might also fall apart on you. All right, so just keep that in mind.
Yeah, well, if you buy a quality gun from the beginning, you don't have to.
Very true.
We don't have to worry about it. And something that I kind of want people to pay attention to as well, these are not Glocks. to where, yeah, there are a lot of companies that they offer drop-in parts. Yeah, they offer, you know, a $500 1911. They offer a $300 1911, whatever it is. You shouldn't buy that and think that it's going to run as reliable as your $400, $500 Glock, and you're not going to have any issues with it. These pistols were supposed to be made in a certain way. If we then start deviating and we start looking at, ultimately, if it's $300, why is it $300? What parts are used, and what are those parts made of, and why are they $300? Because I have seen some companies to where a 1911 was used in a class and their thumb safety broke in half. And then upon looking at the thumb safety, I was like, oh crap, like that just looks or feels like it is just like crappy, you know, Turkish plastic or something. And you can guess what brand it was. But so just know what your gun's made out of. Okay, look at the parts and really think about, what am I getting the pistol for, right? Do I want it to be built by a quality individual, quality company? And do I have enough knowledge to kind of look at it and know whether something's right or something's wrong with it? The next topic I want to get into is looking at holsters. Okay, so what we're going to talk about right now, the holsters that I have personally carried and worn and things of that nature. This 1911 was my everyday carry pistol for a year, meaning for one whole year, I did not carry anything other than this. And that was summer, that was winter. Okay, I don't change my gun due to what the weather is outside. The only thing that I do kind of change my carry gun for is if I'm just like running outside real quick to grab the mail or, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, I'm in basketball shorts and a t-shirt. I might throw a gun on with an ulti clip and go and do that. But if I'm going places where there are people, I have a people gun. So, okay, and we can take that however we want. So when we look at holsters for it, okay, I am kind of geared towards leather holsters now. Okay, and when I say leather, I mean actual leather, quality leather, not DeSantis or whatever else that's out there, because that is not quality leather. Okay, quality leather that is reinforced. So when I draw the pistol out, the holster's not collapsing in my waistband. Okay, with these, I like running loops. A cool thing about running loops is I like having about an inch apart from the loops, because that perfectly fits in between the pant loop on my pants, right? So this will fit at about the 330 position, and it's that perfect length to, okay, if I need to move it a little bit as I'm getting in the car, push it back, I have that movement to do so. Now, if you have this two-loop style holster, something that I have found from listening to Steve Fisher of Sentinel Concepts, if you have this style of holster, don't use both loops in the appendix. And you don't have to take a loop off, because if you look at this side guard holster, and most leather holsters like this, I can't remove either loop. All you do, keep this rear, so the loop that's closest to the trigger, keep it closed, and then put this one loop around your belt, okay, whenever you're rocking it in appendix. And the reason why, you'll now have it to have a little bit more of a movement, where if you keep it like this, it's stuck like this in your appendix. And what I have found is, when you don't have holsters that are angled properly, or you know, it's not, that's where they start digging into your leg and things of that nature, okay? So if you have a two-loop style leather holster, run it with one loop if you're going to use it in the appendix. If you have a proper belt, it doesn't matter how heavy the gun is, okay? So that's my option for leather holsters. When it comes to Kydex, I used McKinney-Tech for my 1911. And he makes a great one. I actually used this one in the class you were at. His clip design is one of the only clips that I will ever use, because it goes underneath your belt. Okay, it does not stop at your belt, which is the issue with most clips. And I've seen a lot of people, especially on Instagram, things of that nature, where they draw their gun and the whole gun comes out with the holster. But then that holster company says he's the best holster company in the world, and he charges $120 for him. Okay, well, let's look at that, right? Because that's a part of the freaking holster.
Yep.
I run a wing on it. Okay, I have found that running wings makes a world of difference in the appendix. Um,
Hmm.
so that's just kind of my thoughts. If you run outside the waistband, and outside the waistband does not mean, yeah, I'm pointing the gun at you guys. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna shoot. Gonna blow up. Anyway, outside the waistband does not mean open carry. Okay, I just want to go ahead and preference that. Any outside the waistband holster that I use, that does not mean I'm open carrying the holster. Okay, uh, I'm not. Open carry is the dumbest thing ever unless you were forced to open carry due to your job. Okay,
Hmm.
that's it. Open carry is stupid. I like pancake style holsters for outside the waistband because it pulls it tight enough up against my body that I
Hmm.
can throw a t-shirt over it and nobody can see it. Okay, so
Yep.
outside the waistband, pancake holsters. What do you got for holster wise?
So I have a preference for Kydex. That's just my preference. Um, but for me, I make a lot of my own holsters. So for this one, I also have a lot of 1911s. Also, this is the RCS overhook, right? So it has the same style clip that goes underneath the belt. Also running a mod wing, pushing in closer. So this is more so just for appendix. I could carry this at the 3 or 4 o'clock if I wanted, but this is just more so designed for appendix. Another one, if I'm running a light bearing like my commander I have this holster I made. So these are made with drones from, just give a little bit of a background. I make holsters. So I just get the molding drones and then I mold it based on a Kydex. And then this is a fixed retention type holster. So I had the gun apart, but you could just see it would sit in and then I'd have no issues. And then I could run this appendix. I can run it 3 o'clock, no issues. Now the first holster that I got when I started carrying 1911s, this is the Alien Gear Cloak Tuck 3.0. I want to say.
Okay. Yep.
So this is the first holster I ever got for my 1911.
Yeah.
So trying it out, it conceals well, but as you can see, it's a lot of holster. All right, so I don't really carry this as much, and this is more so kind of like the hybrid between the leather kind of breathable material and the Kydex.
Right.
But it works. This is your preference. It does work. It's very comfortable to carry. It's a lot to manage inside the waistband. I don't really carry outside. I don't really use outside of waistband holsters for carry. More so just wherever I'm training. But more so I just prefer all inside of waistband when I'm carrying a 1911. But
Okay.
my version Kydex is the way to go.
Okay. Reinforced leather does the same thing. It's fine. No. I agree. Kydex is a good way to go for me, and with me being an 80-year-old man. Okay. I prefer leather holsters, and in my opinion, I kind of like a holster that gives a little bit where Kydex it doesn't. So there are some situations, especially carrying appendix, where I kind of enjoy having a leather holster that isn't just formed in one way and has no movement to it. That Kydex does. Something that I do want to discuss now is extra parts. Okay.
Yes.
If now this, and yet again, this is not a Glock. This is not a P320. This is not a M&P where we can just drop in parts. The parts that I kind of recommend to people, they're fitted. Okay, so make sure, go to a gunsmith, make sure that they're properly fitted to the gun. Fitted parts that I would keep on standby would be your firing pin stop. Okay, I would have a fitted one of those on standby. An extractor I would have on standby. Okay, and those are it for the fitted parts that I would say within the first 0 to 5,000 rounds, right? I actually will say 0 to 10,000 rounds. I would have those two parts, just in case. So if there are any issues at a course or anything like that, swap them out, no issues. 0 to 5,000 rounds, non-fitted parts that I would have would be your recoil spring and your firing pin spring. I would go ahead and have those and switch those out. If you run Wilson flat wire springs in your gun, those are good. I think he markets them for like 10,000. I normally subtract 1,000 from what a manufacturer says, so you're good for 8,000 to 9,000 rounds through your gun with that one spring. So that's pretty solid. That's kind of what I think. Having grips, okay. So the thumb safety isn't going to fall off my gun. The grip safety isn't going to fall off my gun. The grips are held on there by screws. So if this was going to be a gun where I was going to have it for carry, I was going to have it for courses, I was going to have it for whatever, I'm going to have extra grips and extra screws on standby. Whether that's okay, they're in my truck, they're in my range bag, they're in my whatever. I'm going to keep those on. I'm not just going to have this one set because I actually had a situation where I was. It was as a backup gun. It wasn't my primary, but I was carrying a Smith & Wesson J-frame 642 with the Smith & Wesson crappy rubber grips. And actually, I have them right here because every time people tell me how great their grips are and how they don't need to change them out, I keep these to show them that they're full of crap. So these grips, okay, and as you guys can see, I keep extra J-frame grips just for the same reason. But I had an issue where the housing on these J-frame Smith & Wesson grips, they get screwed into a rubber housing area, okay? So I was carrying the gun and the grip fell off.
Yeah.
Thankfully, I caught it and I felt like something was moving, and when I shifted, the grip like kind of fell from my shirt, and I was like, oh, crap and A. And I was like, well, okay, well, good thing I can still shoot the gun without a grip on it. But that's something to think about, right? So always check your gear and look at what the screw is getting screwed into, okay? Because if it's a metal screw getting screwed into rubber, I'd probably just change it out anyway and make sure it's a metal housing into it. And after that day, I went with Ultimate grips on my revolvers, and I've never looked back. So that's just my kind of opinion. What do you got?
Wouldn't take anything away from that. So keep replacement springs. So anything that has a spring, so your firing pin, your mainspring housing, your magazine catch, like I'd have all replacement springs. Some of the springs more likely not to go, but it's always, they're not in it. They're pretty inexpensive to maintain, so I always keep a few on hand. The things for the grip screws, I recommend going with the ones that have kind of like the Torx head. Stay away from the Phillips head, especially if they're not hardened screws. They have a real easy tendency to strip themselves. So if you get extra screws, try to get hardened ones and always go for, and I recommend going for the Torx head ones. All right, less likely to strip those, especially if you're always changing out your grips or they start wearing out. So just keep replacement of those on hand. And then one thing I recommend is going with what I have in here is the Wilson Combat Shock Buff. I keep for the guide rods. I have these on all my 1911s. For those of you who don't know what this is, this acts as a shock absorber because when the gun cycles, the slide impacts the guide rod. All right, when you're impact inside the frame, you have steel on steel impacting steel. All right, so there's a lot of hard impacts, and that's what leads a lot of frames to crack, especially if they're poor quality. So I would just recommend putting this little shock absorber so it lessens that impact, lessens the stress on the frame, less likely to crack your frame when you're running with these. And they're pretty good. They're advertised anywhere from like 3,000 to 5,000 rounds, but you get a pack of 6 for like $10. So I would just keep those on hand. Really inexpensive, and it's good. This is just pretty much insurance for your 1911. All right, it just prolongs the life of your actual firearm. So I highly recommend.
So I'm gonna say this. He advocates shock buffs. Cool. I do not. The reason why I do not, I have had seven people, I want to say, and that's a low ball, have those in their guns in a class, and they used them. They shot them a lot. They didn't put them in right before the class. Okay, so they had been shock buffs that have been used a little bit, and they fell apart and locked the entire gun up. So if you're going to use them, I wouldn't use them in a carry gun. If you're going to use them, inspect them, which goes with anything, inspect them. But 1911s have been shot for a super long time without shock buffs and haven't been beating up the guns. So that's just my kind of opinion with it. Okay, that's he advocates using them. Cool. I have seen from just my experience that that's not a route that I go. I keep that's the same. Okay, I'm more of I think a traditionalist, however you want to word it, because I run a leather holster with a GI recoil system and got it. Okay.
The term you look for is purist.
Whatever. So that's just my kind of 2 cents with that. Okay. Do you have one thing I do want to talk about? So calibers, right? We have 45s, we have 9mm, 38 special, or 38 super.
Mm-hmm.
They make 40 Smith & Wesson,
Yep.
10mm, a whole bunch of them, right? If you go with a 45 or a 9mm, I haven't seen a lot of issues out of them. Now,
Mm-hmm.
if you go with a 45 model, government model 1911, that is probably the most reliable design out there because
Mm-hmm.
it has been the design for 100 years.
Yep.
Well, more than 100. The 9mm design is getting there. It's getting there. I've seen some Dan Wesson, some Nighthawks, and some Les Baer 9mm run pretty good. Okay.
Yep.
There are some 1911 9mm out there that are not good. Like my SIG that I had, it had a lot of reliability issues, and a lot of them. I spent a couple $100. I no longer have them, and I've been shooting that gun now for over a year and a half, and haven't had them. Thousands of rounds, and I haven't had any issues with them. So that's just my kind of 2 cents with it. Just pay attention to your stuff, know what you got, and if you do have issues, know the proper fix to the issue. And what I hate hearing is where people say, well, your gun sucks, just buy a new one. Well, if you don't have the budget to spend $800-900 on a 1911, maybe you could spend $400 or $500 just to get it tuned and fixed. So look at that route. But also, when you get into a 1911, don't look for budget. And that's normally the issue. That's something I'll be honest with you too. When I found the TAC Ops, it was like $800, $900. Came with 4 magazines. It had front strap checkering. It had Novak style sights. It had a mag well. It had everything I wanted on it. So I was like, oh, that's perfect, and it's a great price. Looking at it now, I should have just went with a Dan Wesson, a Nighthawk, a Les Baer, whatever it is. Okay, I should have, because I wouldn't have spent anywhere near. I wouldn't have spent money on tuning it up or anything like that. I would have spent money on a Cerakote years later. So that's just my kind of opinion. What do you think? Closing thoughts on 1911?
Just 2 things. So the one with 9mm 1911s, it's not so much the gun themselves that cause issues, it's more so their magazines, and I have one here for an example. So the thing with the 9mm style 1911 magazines, unlike the ones in the 45, is you don't really have the follower supporting the round like you do. This is a 45, so you have follower support all the way down to the bottom, so you don't have a tendency of your nose or your rounds to nosedive. Unlike 9mm magazine, round nosedives. All right, so that's where you get a lot of issue. I just keep this as an example. This is an old Metgar magazine.
None of mine do that.
Well, you have Wilson Combat mags.
No, my SIG mags don't even do that.
Oh, okay. So yeah, so stay away from Metgar 9mm magazines. Yeah, they're $15 for a reason. So this is where you get a lot of reliability issues with your magazines when you cheap out. So go with reputable companies who make 9mm magazines, because this is what causes your issues. So if you ever load around, especially like this, load one in your gun and take the mag out, you're gonna have another round come out after it. All right, so just be aware of that. And then I keep this around as a constant reminder, because this is when I was new to guns. Stay away from these things. All right, these little bushing compensators that go on the 1911s, these things are the biggest piece of junk ever. And those people who think they work, but not for the reason you think they do. Like, it doesn't work like a normal compensator where you redirect gases up. It's just more weight on your slide. All right, that's the only reason why you feel less recoil with these specifically. And also, they may be marketed as drop-in, but this one specifically caught on my barrel, and I didn't realize what it was dragging. I just thought it was too heavy to cycle the ammunition. But no, it was catching on the barrel because there was shards of metal inside here because it wasn't properly finished, and it was just scratching up the crap out of my barrel. So stay away from these. All right. Doesn't matter who makes them. Stay away from bushing compensators. All right. They don't work. So don't do it.
Okay, there you go. All right, guys. Well, that is all we have for the 1911 segment. I appreciate you guys watching. As always, stay tuned for more. Sarge out.